got to Canada?
I said, I left where I was going, went back to my wife. I said, we're on. So anyway, to cut that story short, the delay in getting landed immigrant visa. When we got here, I asked, I said, why was the delay? They were looking for our children. I was in Washington with my wife. The children were back home, running from Lagos to Onitsha to all over during the war. We couldn't locate them. Canada couldn't locate them. And because we've put their names, 2 boys and 2 girls, they wanted us all. They wanted to. I said, but you should have told me. I would have told you that I don't even know where they were. So that's the end of that story.
You moved to Canada from America with your wife while the children were still...
Oh yeah, because the idea was, I'll go, don't forget, I left in 66. The war started 67. That was when the pressure for me to come home. And I said, I'm not coming. Our children were there. We were thinking eventually they will come join us and spend a few years in the US, and then we all go back. We were already buying equipment, appliances. To put. We got a house in Lagos at Surulere. And I'm saying, oh, when we move in, we'll have all these new appliances, we'll live large. So I was there with my wife alone. But when we came here, the war had broken out. They were running around, being shuffled by our parents, running from one place to the other. But eventually, when the war ended, there was no problem. We got them. They joined us in 1972.
In Canada. All right. What you met on the job, was that what you were thinking you would meet?
Well, let me backtrack a bit. Before we left Washington, Canada, and I use Canada as represented by my director, Alex Foti, was always in contact to find out what was happening. You know, we did not get in here till 6 months after, you know, because of the delay in getting landed immigrant. He kept the job for me. He kept calling, and every time I called, he says, Michael, don't waste your money. But I said, IMF, where I work and where we live, we have internet, you just make call, we don't pay. He says, I have the same here, you don't worry, I'll call you. So the rapport, the welcoming nature, it's just incredible. It's mind-boggling how somebody is received. My problems got to be my boss's problem. And when we got here, he asked me to make sure we got here July 1. That's Canada Day. But I stupidly wanted, I enjoyed the American July 4 celebrations, and I wanted to see it for the last time before coming. So I delayed. We came here July 6 after the American, a Saturday. And he called me, he says, when you get here, I want you to visit me the following day, which was a Sunday, the 7th of July. So look, Sunday, we went in to his place, and Alex and the wife, Mary, they hosted us. And I said to my wife, you know, back home, I don't recall my chief statistician inviting me to his place. Here, I haven't started work, and we were invited, we were hosted, fed, wined, and dined. And the next day, we went to work. No, the next day, Monday, yeah, I went to work. But when we left Alex's home at Apache Crescent, I said, let me go locate the office, Tony's pasture. Wow. It was serene. The Ottawa River, beautiful day, green, blue. I stopped the car. I said to my wife, Liz, I'm not going back to Nigeria. She didn't say a word. I said, Liz, did you hear me? My spirit, I felt it, that this is where my spirit wanted to dwell. And that's it. The next day we went to work.
So tell us about the experience at work.
Yeah, that's what you see. I said preamble to that. These are part and parcel of it. The Dominion Bureau of Statistics, DBS, they paid for our hotel. A colleague at work, Roger Heath, every evening will come pick us up to show us around, to help us look for accommodation. That's individual. My boss, as an individual, they all went out to do things for us. So first day at work, I went in and Alex introduced me to the staff and took me down to the assistant chief statistician in charge of personnel. Today they call them human resources. And they brought up my file, and the guy says, Mr. Adibe, sign here. The salary on the paper was 9,000 something. I said, no, Mr. Labos here, it's not me. Here is the letter I got from Public Service Commission. It says 8,500, and now there's 1,000 on top. I said, please, that's not my own. He said, oh, Mr. Adibe, he flipped. He said, that's the same letter, but salaries have gone up. And that's where you are? I said, wow. So I signed, then went upstairs to my office. I have staff of 4, but there were 3 of them. There are 2 ladies and a guy. And I was introduced to them. And I was shown my office. My office was directly opposite that of my director, Alex Foti. I didn't know what I was doing, but I had a job description saying these are your things you have to do. So I had to start from scratch to ask what was what. By roughly around noon, knock, knock, knock on my door. Alex, Michael, we have to leave. We have to go home. I said, Alex, what's happening? In those days, the building was not air conditioned. And Public Works Department, which ran, maintained and ran buildings, government office buildings, if the humidex, that's the temperature with the humidity, if it gets up to certain points, close down. They don't want people to faint in the offices or die. So I said, go, go, go. So I ran to my car, drove back to the hotel. So we went to Bank Street, looked around and enjoyed the hot sunny day. Next day, I got to meet the lady from whom I was taking over the section. And chain smoker, which I don't like smoking. I said, Betty Emery was the name. She's passed on now. I said, please, I don't like smoking. Can we do this meeting without you smoking? Oh, yeah. You could see her. She didn't want to snuff off her cigarette, but she did. She respected my request. And talking of cigarettes, let me summarize. Later on, when I moved on to Treasury Board, I had a boss who was smoking. And I said to Bud Joyce, not in my office. He'll call meeting in his office. He's my boss, I have to go. But when I walked in, I said, no, your office stinks. I don't want to meet here. Come to my office and don't smoke in my office. And Bud says to me, Mike, as long as you don't hit me, that's my boss. And I want to contrast the people I met here as my bosses, as my colleagues, with the bosses I worked with back home. So work experience here started off wonderfully.
No, apart from your bosses, of course, there are
colleagues, yeah. Yeah.
So what was that working relationship
As I said, right from the beginning, Roger Heath, a colleague, who took time off after work to show us the city to help us look for accommodation. The job experience, which I didn't have. I didn't even know what deflation was. And I'm in charge of the deflation section. The lady I took over from, Betty Emery, came to show me, to explain things. And when I said, don't smoke, she acquiesced. She agreed with me. The only reticent fellow in my group was the man, a French guy. Why did I forget his name? He says, look, Mr. Adibe, I tell you one thing, I work Monday to Thursday, Friday I take off because I go moose hunting. I didn't know what the guy was telling me about. I don't know, moose hunting, what has that got to do with work? But he was laying it on the line that I have to let him go on Fridays. And I didn't know this. I said, sure. If there was any resistance, that's one that I experienced.
Mr. Adibe, you know why I find your story quite interesting? I've spoken to a good number of people who came here in the 50s, 60s, even 70s, and I don't get this kind of story. It's always about the issue of discrimination, the fact that somebody is black, and you're coming into a community that is densely populated with Caucasians. So yours stands out as a very unique experience for me. You didn't witness any form of discrimination.
I've just given you the two instances. Honestly, I did not. That's why I prefaced my commentary that it's idiosyncratic. Honestly, I'm blessed. It's God's doing. Don't get me wrong. I can't say there is no discrimination. I have friends who said, oh, discrimination, they go for interviews. They say, no, we are being discriminated. I said to one of my friends, if you go with the mindset that there will be discrimination, that you won't get the job, you won't get it. And that's what happened. And some of them, right here in Ottawa, I have somebody who used to have that attitude, negative attitude. Oh, I'll be discriminated against. And it happened. But this person in his family has somebody who, my God, has risen up there. And I mean up there. I don't want to give details because I don't want to expose the family or the, So again, God is in control. And we have to have a positive focus on what you are there to do. I tell my boss, I don't know what I'm doing. I went to Alex Foti one day. I said, hey, look, there's this portion in my job description that I have to do reconciliation with the income estimates. I said, I don't know what I'm doing. So Alex says, but Michael, you've been doing that. I said, I haven't. He says, well, you meet with John Edwards from the income side and I'm from the expenditure side, and we compare the trend. That's all this. If the trend is going the same direction, you've reconciled. Means our estimates from both the income side and the expenditure side of the national accounts. He says, you've been doing it. I say, oh?
I think another lesson I'm learning from this conversation is also similar to something I learned from our last guest that we spoke to, Isabel Granger. She spoke about the fact that we all talk about the system, how there's so much discrimination in the system. But something I took away from that conversation, she was talking about who you are and what you want. And she did stress that don't self-eliminate. Wait and see. Just be positive, but wait and see. Do you agree?
Of course.